My name is Ivory Saliga. Today I'm going to discuss about medical tourism, the international pursuit of non-emergency treatment outside of the patient's home country. This is likely to include a free or post-operative stay abroad, during which some tourist activities may be undertaken according to Johnston et al. 2010. Medical tourism is differential from cross-border care primarily because the individual initiates and cover all of the expenses associated with the treatment they are seeking abroad. Medical is a distinct niche within health tourism. It can be differentiated from other forms of health tourism on the basis that is involved medical intervention canal to the marketing efforts of the health providers is destination countries involve making a deliberate link between medical care and tourism, emphasizing the potential for pre-operative tourism activity. Together, all of these interrelated factors have assured that medical tourism has developed into a multi-billion dollar industry.
Hi everyone, I'm Kia and I'm going to continue the discussion about medical tourism. Medical tourism is when a person travels to another country for medical care. The risk for complication depend on the destination, the facility where the procedure is being performed, and whether you are in a good physical and psychological condition for the procedure. Most of the medical tourists are North American, Western European, and Middle Eastern in origin, and India medical tourists are typically expatriate or descendants. Thus, Europeans seek treatment in Asia, specifically Thailand and Malaysia. Malaysia is a destination for patients from the Middle East. Medical tourism, also called health tourism, surgical tourism, or medical travel, international travel from the purpose of receiving medical care. For example, of such procedures include stem cell transplant and gender reassignment operation.
So next, I will be the one to continue. With respect of ethical issues, transplant tourism and reproductive tourism raise a range of ethical issues and concerns that differ from some of aforementioned procedures because of the implication they have for the commodification of the donor, the body, gender discrimination, understanding of health care rights. So, Thailand competes with Singapore for the Japanese medical tourists, and destination variously become known as the place of heart. So, dental treatments, transplant, productive, and assistant cosmetic surgery. While there is potentially an endless list, treatments south the most common include one of the most common here is hip replacement. Second is heart surgery, transplant surgery, cosmetic surgery, reproductive treatments, and experimental treatments. The trend of people traveling treatment tends to be one where those high-income developed countries seek treatments in low-income developing countries. So, most of medical tourists are from North American, Western European, and Middle Eastern in origin. And in India, the medical tourists are typically expatriates or descendants of expatriates from Britain and United States. So preference is shaped variously by targeted marketing, by the destination country, price, proximity, the treatment, south, and religious observation.
Good afternoon. I am next reporter. Medical tourism has only recently attracted research attention, with most empirical research being conducted since the early 2000s. Until this time, most of commentary has been generated by journalism and observation commentary rather than the empirical based explanation. The people documenting about medical tourism. Hopkins in 2010. There is an emerging body of research that addresses medical tourism in specific regions. Connell 2006-2008, Chi 2007, and the movement and the experiences of medical tourism. Snyder at 2011, which respect to the implication for departing health system and healthcare less is known, and Lund Pierce and primary research in New Zealand. Lovelock and Lovelock 2013 and the double less other research project underworld but yet to be published. So that's people they conduct research about medical tourism in early 2000. So in this chapter we will explore a range of ethical issues provoked by the practices of medical tourism including the, the effect of medical tourism on provider and the departure societies, how medical tourism is further privatization of healthcare provision, the commodification of healthcare, and the perception of the fetish of the consumer. The amplification of access to medical cares for locals and the nature of health system development and provider count. The role medical tourism play in the spread of the infectious diseases and the amplification of the public health in departure countries and globally. The rest of the patients.
The effect of medical tourism on destination and departure countries. Medical tourism is a part of a wider and more encompassing sub-industry of health tourism, but differs as it does not involve a formal cross-border arrangement between countries and is initiated by the patient rather than the patient's home country health service or system. The tourism side of medical tourism emerged in relation to those who establish the connection between would-be patient traveler, the destination provider, the accommodation, the mode of travel, and the pre-operative and recovery experience. Medical tourism industry has invested in promoting a more positive image of third world destinations, emphasizing the credential of those who will perform the medical service and the safety accreditation of the destination health service. The effect of tourism on destination and departure countries. Tourism has been around for many years. In the past, it was mainly used for research purpose for young scholars, but over time, it has evolved to become its own individual industry. Medical tourism is a rising type of tourism whereby a tourist leaves their home country to receive medical attention in another. Countries visited through medical tourism are usually less developed countries, and the effects of the medical tourism has been beneficial to both sides. According to Orbis Research, in 2016, the global medical tourism market was worth 19.7 billion and by 2021, it could reach 46.6 billion. In fact, for some developing countries, medical tourism is one of the biggest industries. India, for example, is renowned for its success in the medical tourism space. In 2002 alone, the industry earned at least 2 billion in revenue for the country, and this number has gradually grown. The effect of medical tourism has been proven beneficial to less developed nations. According to a study on the Thailand, most developing country governments see medical tourism as an opportunity to generate more national income.
So I will be continuing the effect of medical tourism on destination and departure countries. There is no regulatory framework for medical tourism, and in the absence of regulation, it becomes possible for already existent health inequities to become perpetuated and entrenched. So it means that there is no regulatory procedures or legal policies for medical tourism, and because of this, it is possible for different outcomes to be preserved or perpetuated. Moreover, medical tourism hinges on the development of private provisions of care for profit for those who can afford it. So medical tourism join or is included in the development of provision of care for profit, which means that it contributes to the trade of healthcare and it ultimately contributes to the continuous global health inequalities. The key ethical dilemma provoked by the medical tourism and its many manifestations is the issues of distributive justice and the challenge it presents to notion of social good and universal public provision of health care. So medical tourism provoked the issue of distributive justice, and this challenge was presented to the notion of social good and universal public provision of health care. It is the tourism industry addressed justice. Medical tourism throws into a relief range of issues surrounding just distribution of health care and raises many issues about how a would-be medical tourist might adapt principal practice when considering seeking treatment abroad. Medical immediately medical tourism immediately demands that distributive justice must also be considered in terms of how this practice impacts on the distribution of health resources internationally and what redistributive measures are necessary to ensure more equitable health outcomes globally.
Now, I am going to discuss the undermining health services at home. All high incomes countries are experiencing considerable pressure on their health care system with aging population, increases in the number of people with chronic conditions, and increasing costs associated with treatment and care. Medical tourism seemingly offers a panacea to the pressure within high-income countries to deliver certain kinds of surgery and care whilst simultaneously providing a cheaper option for those prepared to pay for their health care. Some may perceive the exchange that is taking place as one of mutual benefit, where low-income countries can attract foreign exchange and improve their health infrastructure, and high-income countries can address increased need and constrained health budgets. But while we might be able to identify mutuality, it does not necessarily mean that an equal exchange is taking place or that the one outcome will be mutually beneficial for all or even the majority of members of either departure or destination country.
Medical tourism provokes other potential issues for publicly funded health services in a medical tourist home country. In addition to that, there are a number of risks associated with traveling for treatment, including embarking on long flights after surgery and the risk of embolisms. Next is the disruption of care when the patient travels home. And the last one is the inability to address malpractice in the destination country. Recent review literature did not locate statistical data on complication rates for medical tourists, but there were many anecdotal accounts of medical misadventure, with some authors arguing that the cost of public health system in home countries is extensive. Furthermore, patients may not be provided with adequate information, and accepted Western medical norm of informed consent may be compromised through this process.
health service and care provision abroad, tourists versus locals. Medical tourism in developing countries provides an important source of foreign revenue. As a practice, medical tourism has been criticized for draining public resources in destination countries. It also encouraged an internal migration where skilled health professionals migrate from rural to urban areas to work in the new private facilities. Medical tourism is when a person travels to another country for medical care. People may travel to another country to get health care for many reasons, to help the rural areas and migrate it in urban areas. Also in our days today, it has many illnesses that can harm us if we don't care for ourselves. Like COVID, many countries will helping together or combine together to have a solution for that said illness because in developing countries it has not enough tools or machine, so other countries that have a complete resources of machine go to other countries to help so that to get a solution for that illness.
Everyone, good afternoon. I'm going to report health service and care provision abroad tourists versus locals. Medical tourism can contribute to the development of two-tier system that facilitates the flow of wealthy patients into private hospitals and the local poor into hospitals for locals or without adequate care. In developing countries, medical tourism potentially offers a means to stem the flow of people seeking treatment abroad. So we have two-third system: first, the wealthy patient into private hospitals, and the second, the local poor into hospitals for local poor into hospitals for locals, or we shall say walang pangangalaga. So medical tourism has the ability to reduce the number of individuals seeking treatment overseas in underdeveloped countries. Second, the ethical issues arise when health professionals in destination countries are paid to provide services for tourists rather than address public health concerns. Such two-third systems are evident in Israel, India, and Malaysia, and ultimately contribute to poor access to healthcare for locals. So we have these three countries ultimately contribute to poor access to healthcare for locals and poorer health outcomes. And those destination countries where health professional training is publicly funded. And additionally, in these countries, developers are often offered tax incentives to develop private hospitals in return for providing health care for the locals. And all of this movement, poor to rich, rural to urban, public to private, are not only happening in developing countries. They are also evident and developed in our countries.
So good day everyone. My topic is privatization and globalization of healthcare. So while still dominated by wealthy elites, increasingly it is within the grasp of middle income earners in developed and developing countries. This shift has been aided by the globalization and liberalization of the health services industry. Specifically, medical tourism. It is an outcome of the privatization of medical care and the growth of the healthcare market globally. For example, India, Thailand, Indonesia, and Nepal.
And with respect to medical tourism, these itineraries remain largely unregulated, lucrative for some and disenfranchising for others.
For me, the explanation is that
In considering the fact that there is a need to respect medical tourism, the plan will still luxury and control in which produce a good profit to others and while dominating to others. The internet has been a major facilitator of medical tourism. Patients can research their medical condition, search providers, product treatment options online, and brokerage who can link patient for facilitates. For me, the explanation is that practically internet plays such as a big role in facilitating different departments, including medical tourism. Patients can have the access to check online their medical condition, providers, product, and treatment. Fees can be conveniently linked online as well.
Increasing privatization of healthcare services and provider in departure countries has also facilitated the global nature of this industry, with governments seeking to play a reduced role in healthcare delivery. Provisions are made to attract foreign investment in healthcare delivery. This has ensured that healthcare is now one of the most significant markets in the world. Until recently, most of the trade in health services has involved the movement of health professionals, but increasingly with relaxation of foreign investment law in many destinations, there is the emerge of a global hospital industry with companies acquiring hospitals in multiple locations across regions. This has occurred alongside the globalization of associated industry. For example, the pharmaceutical industry, health insurance markets, telemedicine, and the biotechnology industry, where increasingly clinical trials, testing providers, and producers are globally located at a global level. The General Agreement on Trade and Services represent the liberalization of all services and optimizes the new liberal legacy. This is well illustrated by the Indian state response to GATS and the provisions made for private hospital and the intention to expand medical tourism for foreign currency earnings. Under GATS, countries could make binding liberalization commitment in relation to 4 areas. 1. Cross-border supply, telehealth or laboratory services. 2. Consumption abroad, medical tourism. 3. Commercial presence, foreign investment and health facilities. And 4. Natural persons, temporary migration of health workers abroad. There is now pressure from medical tourism destination providers through GATS negotiations to ensure that insurance companies will cover services provided abroad, those that have committed to foreign investment and health facilities. 35 countries so far will contribute to the growth of medical tourism, but it is uncertain that this will lead to better health care for locals. It is also not clear whether the associated economic benefits generated by medical tourism for a range of tourist players, including travel agents, airlines, hotels, taxis, and local vendors, will be enough to offset the long-term implications of the rise of two-tier health system and educate public provision of health care for the poor and destination countries.
What is transplant tourism? Transplant tourism is when people travel to other country to buy an organ for transplant. Transplant tourism also involves intermediaries, agents, and healthcare providers who arrange the recruitment of donors and travel for transplant. China and Philippines have been significant supplier of organ for transplant. In 2005, 66,000 kidneys were transplanted from 98 countries, yet this only address 10% of the needs. Next, organ trafficking and transplantation tourism is illegal in these countries. The harvesting of organs from executed prisoners in China has been outlawed. Yet the trade continues, and it appears little is done to sanction those who break the law in relation to this industry. Organ trafficking is the practice of stealing or buying organs through exploitation to be sold on the black market for the profit. And transplant tourism is the traveling to other countries for the purpose of buying, selling, or receiving organs. Organ trade. The organ trade can also take other form. For example, a live donor and recipient from different countries will move to the third country for the transplant. Next, the financial incentive. Those providing the organs are motivated by financial incentive, invariably live in extreme poverty, and are providing organ for people from high-income countries. Financial incentive motivate people in poverty to provide organs. Many of these people experience deteriorating health status after the procedure, which in turn can compound their impoverished living condition when they are unable to work, have to pay for health care, and or are ostracized from their community.